Okay, thank you.
Okay, we can't hear you, Ken. There she is.
Commissioner Pollock, can you hear us?
See? Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. We'll wait. Okay.
Only a couple seconds for Commissioner Pollock.
I did get a text message, Mr. Dodds. He is online and hearing us. Mr. Chairman, why are you showing up online when you're part of our physical meeting here?
Because I logged on to my Teams site so I can see the people that are in the meeting, but it's not doing what used to give me a full index of people to the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not doing that now. Can I click the little people button?
There's an other.
Click on the little people button, Chad. Here, come up. Okay.
I wish once they had settings set, they just wouldn't change them. That's this one is.
Ken, we're still waiting for Ken.
Those of you listening or that can hear me, we're waiting for Commissioner Pollock to try to log on again before we start the meeting, so I appreciate your patience.
So, Commissioner Peterson, if I raise my hand, is that helpful if I do this?
Absolutely.
I will unmute myself. Yes, absolutely. That's incredibly helpful.
Okay, I just noticed that little thing there. So
Hi.
Yeah, I can do that instead of interrupting people.
No, you can unraise your hand.
That would be stellar.
Okay, yeah.
And a high five, a virtual high five.
We're learning everything just in time to go back to in-person meetings. Great.
That will have us all figured out by 2022. It's going to be super.
I won't be here anymore, so you'll have to function.
A couple of us may not be here
You'll
anymore.
have
Don't
to
know.
function without me. Yep.
3 of us may not be here too.
Oh, well, let's not talk like that.
I'll live.
I don't know. I might not.
Commissioner Pollock, still waiting ever so patiently. I do not see him.
Did he log on with a phone number? Is he in there?
Ken, under his phone number? 238-1808? No? Okay. Is that his? Okay, what was that?
Somebody just.
1808 is Commissioner Pollock.
Yep, okay. Are you on, Ken? Okay.
Commissioner Pollock, are you on, sir?
Yes, I am. Sorry for the delay.
No, it's okay.
Who can explain?
You're here. That's all that matters, sir. Okay, with that, are we recording and we're live? Okay,
Yep.
With that, Commissioners, I'll call it July 21st, 2020 Cass County Commission meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Peterson?
I am here.
Dean?
Here.
Pollock?
Here.
Shirley?
Here.
Breitling?
Here. Thank you. We have got a full quorum. With that, Ms. Ward, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Those of you at home, please stare at a flag that's near you or stare at the flag on the screen. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioners, I presume, as we all settle in, I presume we had a chance to review the prior meeting minutes, so look for a motion to approve or amend.
Move to approve.
Is there a second, please? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 I presume everyone's unanimously approving of amazing meeting minutes. As always, Ms. Warden, well done. Commissioners, you have the order of agenda presented to you. I don't see any amendments, and I wasn't aware of any amendments, so what we should have is just the order of agenda as presented.
Move to approve the order of agenda.
Right now, is there a second, please? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Consent agenda. Commissioners, you've had a chance, I hope, to review the consent agenda. It wasn't too exciting, but still enough to pay attention to, as always. With that, I'd look for a motion to approve, amend, discuss.
Move to approve.
Is there a second, please? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on approval of the consent agenda? Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Brightling,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Pollock,
Yes.
Shirley,
Yes.
Motion passed. Thank you. We now have a chance for public comment. If anyone online, or I don't see anyone in the audience here today, is not on the agenda and would like to talk to the commission for a couple minutes, now is your time to do so. I don't see anyone scrambling, virtually or otherwise. So with that, we will proceed on to the regular agenda. Item number 1 on the regular agenda, County Highway 16, unauthorized road approach. Mr. Benson, I believe, is on. There he is, Mr. Benson, as well as Commissioner Brightling. Mr. Benson, you want to lead off, please?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This has been an ongoing, over a year-long effort now to work with Mr. Biffert on his access, and starting last year when he applied for an access, and then just went ahead and submitted it without permit. Back in January, we had sent a letter notifying him that we would be notifying him that we would remove the access. We then ended that time period based on the fact that we, in good faith, we would continue to negotiate. At this time, we're moving forward to open up that time window again, so we can continue this process forward and either remove the access or get more cooperation with Mr. Biffert. If Commissioner Brightling has any other comments.
The background that I would indicate is that on the January 21 meeting, the board authorized the chairperson of this commission to sign a letter addressing Mr. Biffert and his problem with this approach. That letter was mailed on the 22nd of January. There was an effort to try to negotiate, and as a result, we, by letter, Mr. Biffert's attorneys indicated that we would have the matter on hold. Now, the notice provision in that letter was taken from the county ordinance about approaches. The letter, however, that went out is over the signature of this commission by its chairperson. The statute dealing with decisions of county commissioners calls for a 21-day period. The days, I believe, would count from the 22nd of January till the 4th of February, and would start counting when we serve another letter saying the hold is no longer in place. He would then have several days left in which he could appeal what we were doing or just ignore us. He has that choice. The requested action is that we request Mr. Burdick, and he's prepared a letter that I've approved to Mr. Biffert's attorneys, telling them that the hold notice that he previously received is no longer running. And that's the request that we have today, is that we authorize our state's attorney to send out such a notice letter.
Anything further, Commissioner?
Any questions? I'd be quick to try to respond, but I have nothing else to add at this point.
Commissioner Steen.
Do we have a copy of the letter that we're going to send available for review?
I've reviewed the letter on email. I did not copy it. It didn't come in to me until today sometime. It just simply states that the date of the correspondence back and forth and the whole provision that was extended is no longer in existence as of this letter.
So does that?
It's a short little letter.
I mean, so does that give any indication to Mr. Bifford what the expectations are within the next 5 days, 10 days, 20 days, 30 days? I'm just curious if that letter's clear enough.
Well, the letter goes to Mr. Bifford's attorney, who's been representing him in the communications back and forth. And it would be inappropriate for us to try to advise his attorney what time periods are available.
And I think, Commissioner Steen, maybe to your point, the issues at hand have been addressed in prior letters.
I understand that.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, I've seen the prior letters. So if the 21-day or the 20-day hold is no longer in force.
The hold on the 20-day notice is no longer in force. But it's my opinion, and I believe Mr. Burdick concurs with me, that we will need to extend that time period out to 30 days.
Mr. Burdick, if you are, I see you're on the line. If you have a chance for commentary, I think now might be a prudent time to do so. If you don't, that's okay too, but anything to add, sir?
Sure. Let me, the letter is fairly brief. Aside from some introductory references to prior correspondence, the active part of the letter reads like this. Due to the lack of acceptable progress in resolving this matter, today the Cass County Commission authorized me to send you a letter notifying you that the deadline discussed in the January 22nd letter and the February 4th email is no longer on hold. Feel free to contact me if you have any further questions. That's what the letter says beyond an introductory sentence or so. Commissioner Breitling indicated a reference to 30 days versus 20 days. I think the distinction he's drawing there is between the language that's found in our encroachment ordinance and the appeals process that's found in statute.
Thank you, Mr. Burdick. Commissioner Steen, and then I'm seeing Commissioner Pollack.
Yeah, just so if the 20-day is the letter is no longer, the 20 days is no longer on hold. I'm looking at the letter, I think the January 7th. That's the letter. It talks about what the expected action date is by Mr. Bifford. Do we have that? So we don't have that.
The letter that went out to him talked about 20 days, and that's what that notice was under the provisions of our access ordinance. But the state statute says a 30-day appeal time, and so I believe that trumps what we have in our access ordinance.
So what I'm getting at, if the 20-day hold is no longer in force, and the letter's dated January 22nd, it looks like, then the effective...
It was dated, yes, January 22nd.
Then
right.
I'm doing real good math, but it looks like that February 12th would have been the date
Yep.
of action. Yeah. So he's basically passed.
No.
Well, that's what I'm asking about the letter. It says it's no longer in place. The whole excuse me, Mr. Brilling. The letter itself says that the hold is no longer in place. That's why I'm asking the question. So do we know? Do we have an expectation of what that date of action should be or should have been by Mr. Bifford and his attorney if the hold is no longer in place? We've already gone past the 20 days. So I'm I'm just confused. If I was the attorney, or maybe I'm not.
We haven't gone past the 20 days because the hold is in place.
Okay, so it's 20 more days.
Correct.
No,
Well,
there are so many days between 22nd of January and the February 4 notice that it came back to us, or that we sent to them saying it's on hold.
12 days.
Okay. And that's still in place.
Okay.
Until we send this letter saying the hold is no longer in place. Now,
So 8 days left.
of the 20,
Right.
but what I'm telling you is that's not applicable.
You think that's okay?
Not applicable, it's 30 days because the state statute trumps our ordinance.
Commissioner Steen, does that make sense? It's less the
It
initial.
does. It does make sense. So now it's, what, 18 days? I mean,
I haven't bothered to count them, but it's in that area.
Approximately 18 days. So yeah,
Right,
okay.
in that ballpark.
That's all I'm getting at. I'm trying to figure out what's the date of the end.
Maybe to cut to the chase, Commissioner Steen, I think what will happen is once we pull this hold off, it'll spur our owner to take action. That's what I'm hoping for.
Mayor.
I'm just being optimistic, right? I've been optimistic this whole time. I'm not gonna lie about that. I've been optimistic the whole time, and I'm obviously not right, so. You won't hear me say that very often. I promise you that.
It's simply, it's getting to the time where we need to fish or cut bait.
Exactly.
Way past time. All right.
Commissioner Steen, anything further?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Pollock, please.
You're on
We
mute.
cannot hear you, sir.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Welcome, Commissioner.
So I really don't care about the number of days, whether it's 21 or 31. The question is, what as a county commission are we prepared to authorize to do? Because I don't think anything is going to happen, and this is going to come down to the county voting to take out the approach, to take out the access. And so if we're going to take this to the next step, we have to be prepared to take it to the final step. And my question of Jason is, are you prepared to do that?
Mr. Benson, please answer, then Mr. Burdick.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Pollock. Going back to the 1970 deed, when we purchased our deeded right of way from the previous landowner, it clearly states that there's that the landowner has one access point 24 feet wide at the placement at the discretion of the county engineer. So based on that, I think we've got clear authority to go out and either have our county forces or pay a contractor to go remove the new 40-foot wide concrete approach and leave the remaining previous field access.
Okay, does it really matter to you if it's 24 feet or 40 feet?
It does, in that based on, and once this access is in, we really have ownership of it. And so generally 5 years, 10 years down the road, we have to, if we come in and reconstruct the road, we end up replacing what existing is there. And depending on the circumstances, it could be warranted, but generally we try to limit the overall width so that and make sure that it's fairly, we've got consistent accesses.
So are you prepared to put them out of business?
I don't think we're looking to put them out of business. We're just looking to maintain access control in accordance with our ordinance, and he had clearly added this new access without removing the other one. In our previous letters to him over the last several months, we've indicated that he needs to remove the agricultural access as we continue to work towards a final solution with his new access. One of those access points needs to be removed, but if if he's not going to move forward and take those steps, in the last winter, he clearly told me that he wasn't going to move anything. Now, after our additional discussions, I was hopeful that he would move forward with removing the field access and then allowing his renter to access off of his new access point. And again, we would continue to work forward in developing a better location for permanent access. His existing access was at a point initially designated by my office, but that was without clear understanding of what was going into this as part of this overall facility, and it was never approved prior to him putting it in.
So I believe that you and the county are totally justified in taking whatever action we deem necessary, but because he's been non-compliant and is resisted on every opportunity. But I'm just trying to get it on the table here that the action that we follow through with is kind of a real heavy-handed application of what the rules are, and we're justified in so doing. But I just want to, when we go down this road, that's where we're going to end up, and I just want to make sure everyone's prepared for that.
Thank you,
Commissioner Pollock.
Go ahead, Mr.
I think that over the years we've had a number of instances where people have just gone in and put accesses in, maybe not knowing that there's a process and a permitting process, or we've had people that have put in for temporary access points to move a house in, and then with the thought that within 3 months they would remove that temporary access, and then a year or two later it's still there, and we've had to let them know that, hey, you either have to remove it or we're going to remove it and put it on your taxes, because we have to maintain some consistent and orderly access onto our highways, or else we have, like some of these older portions of our county roads, where every couple hundred feet there's another road access.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burdick and then Commissioner Brightling.
Just as a point of clarity, the letter I've written, of course, has not been sent. It's just sitting here ready to go. It can certainly be amended. If this commission would rather clarify a timeline other than the one that Commissioner Brightling has described to you, I think you are in a position to do that. When we discussed this with Mr. Biffert's attorney earlier in the year, he'd indicated to me he would like sufficient time to be able to approach the court to stop any action to remove the access if we were about to remove the access. And my comment to him was, we will provide you adequate time. We didn't describe what adequate time constituted. So that's kind of where we are with that. If you want to establish a different time frame, I think you're in a position to do that, if you think there's a better way to do it.
Commissioner Brightling, please.
Just wanted to address Commissioner Pollock. What we do is going to depend on their response. We don't know that we're going to be going out there removing an approach. It may be otherwise. It may be stayed by a court. So we don't know what's going to happen until they respond.
Commissioner Steen.
Well, question for Mr. Brightling. I understand that a court could stay our intent. So I think the best thing here is, what's our intent? I think that's what Commissioner Pollock's asking, and it's what our letter should say, and our letter should say what our intent is. And we might get stayed by a court order, or we might come up with a different type of negotiated out, if you have it. But our intent is to follow through with the ordinance, I'm assuming. The letter that we sent out on January 22nd was pretty clear with what our intent was. If our intent has changed, we should probably put that in the letter, but I surely hope our intent hasn't changed. Otherwise, to gain compliance with an ordinance like any other individual in the county would be expected to do.
Our intent hasn't changed. What my position is, and I believe that Mr. Burdick agrees, is that the state statute trumps the amount of time set forth in that ordinance.
That is fine. I think the time can change. We just set a date. That's why I asked my very original question. What date do we have in there?
I don't believe we have any right to tell his attorney what the date is. That would be inappropriate on our part. What Mr. Burdick is suggesting is that we tell him that we would give him a 1 week's notice before we start digging the thing out. But that has nothing to do with the 30-day time period.
I think basically to summarize this entire conversation, the action today is simply to get the calendar started, to get no more, no less, and we can figure out how they want to react, if they want to react, and we can react accordingly. Because I think what's going to probably happen, I hope anyway, is going to happen is this will suddenly become quote unquote real. So when it becomes real, I think our owner will be forced into action. The action will probably be, I'm curious, I think they'll go into court. But to what extent are you going to invest in attorney's fees to find out that you actually have to follow the building code and planning code? I think it's bad advice. I'm not a lawyer, but I can't imagine some attorney saying, let's go spend, $100,000 or X amount of dollars in court to find out that you actually have to follow planning code. And I think the owner has been to some degree pretty amenable to modification. Certainly we started off with a reaction of I'm not doing anything and leaving everything in place, to now what we have is a letter responding, I'll do basically everything you've asked to some degree. And Mr. Benson, jump in if you want to some degree, with the exception of allowing you the easement to prevent county taxpayers in some future date, should we have slumping because of the building placement. That to me is the big holdup. And again, I don't know how much detail the other commissioners have really spent digging into the nuts and bolts of this, but that's my only concern right now. I think the owners invest a lot of money and is willing to invest even more to make the site accessible and in a way that's amenable to our engineers. The only issue outstanding right now is the easement, potential easement anyway, along the river because the building was placed in the wrong spot. And again, I think this is more about getting the calendar started to force our owner into understanding that this is real and that in the end, they might wind up with a site that's not accessible. Commissioner Steen.
Yeah, besides the unwillingness to, unless the letters aren't up to date, unwillingness to grant the easement.
Correct.
He is also unwilling to remove the gravel field approach until the new approach is put in. He's also going to not going to remove the approach to the frontage road. I mean, there's a couple other things. The two approaches, I think, are the big issue here, but he's unwilling to change that. That's currently, and it might change after he gets the letter. I get that.
I think when it becomes real, I'm hopeful that when it becomes a real thing, Commissioner Steen, that it will be resolved quickly. Commissioner Breitling.
If it would be helpful to the commissioners, I'm certain that Birch could redraft his letter, which is a draft form right now, to indicate in addition to this not being on hold, that we would provide at least 1 week's notice to him before we would start removing the approach. If that would be helpful.
Commissioner Pollack here. I really think what we should do is we should say on August 25th, we're going to begin the process of removing the approach. Let's tell them what we're going to do after a certain date so that they know what the consequences are. Let's just spell it out, what the intention is.
It's spelled out in the original letter, removal.
Well, then let's say that again.
Why?
Well, because we're not saying it in the letter that we're sending them now.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Steen.
I agree with Commissioner Pollack. We should at least put something in there to give some indication. We might offend somebody, but at least we're clear what our expectations are.
Yeah, this is the action that we're going to take on, after this date.
Commissioner Brightling and Mr. Burdick, are you amenable to dropping an actual date in the letter? Mr. Burdick, I see your hands up. You first, and Commissioner Brightling, please.
Sorry, my hand was up from before and I failed to put it down.
Oh, come on.
Problem with electronic hand. Go ahead and ask Commissioner Brightling what he wants, and I'll chime in afterwards.
The question stands, Commissioner Burdick, right? Mr. Burdick, you're amenable to adding a date?
Yes.
Commissioner Brightling, would you be amenable to adding a date? And I understand there's some redundancy, but.
I would be much more agreeable to simply saying that we'll give you a week's notice before we dig it out. Because I'm not prepared to tell you what that date is right now.
Commissioner Steen.
Belabor this too long, but
You already have.
Commissioner Brightling, if we're beyond 30 days, we should be safe in any respect, right?
We're not beyond 30 days.
If the date, August 25th,
Why do you say that's beyond 30 days?
when we're
Which
setting,
days have you counted and not counted?
no, August 25th is more than 30 days away from today even. So if we issue a letter today, that's more than 30 days from today. We should be okay.
I don't think that we should deal in legal matters in okay. I think we should be exact what we're going to do. And that's that, we'll give them a week's notice before we dig it out.
Commissioner Steen.
I'm going to move, to get this moving, that we authorize the state attorney to notify Attorney John Bolger that on or after August 25th, we would intend to basically take the actions that we referred to in our earlier letter dated January 22nd.
Is there a second?
Second, by Pollock.
Moved and seconded, Commissioner Pollock. Thank you. Mr. Burdick, any thoughts on that?
Well, you can leave it at that, or you can also blend the two things you've talked about between Commissioner Steen and Commissioner Brightling, which is to say, on or after August 25th, we'll take the action identified in the January 22nd letter. We will give you at least 10 days or 7 days, whatever you want, notice prior to removing it, something along that line.
Fine with that, and be willing to adjust my motion.
Commissioner Pollock, you were the second.
Sure, on the advice of our legal counsel, I would agree.
Okay, thank you. Discussion. Any discussion? If not, I am going to do a roll call vote on this,
Mr.
please.
Chair, I have a question.
Warden.
So the second part of the motion is to include, is there going to be a date?
7-day notice.
7-day notice
Correct.
of prior to removal?
We have the date certain as well as a 7-day notice prior to removal.
Okay. Got it. And now,
So should it theoretically go beyond, we still give them 7 days. This covers.
Regardless, 7-day
Okay.
notice.
Ms. Warden, is it clear?
yes, it is.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further discussion or questions? If not, again, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Brightling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Anything further on this one? If not, item number 2 on our agenda, plat approval for the FMD Pleasant Township subdivision. Mr. Benson.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'll lead off, and then I know there's several people representing the Diversion Authority on this call as well. This is the first of many diversion plats that will be coming forward. In discussion over the last month and a half or so, it's been determined that the best approach for kind of clearing up issues of easements and other areas to clear up the actual footprint property needed for the diversion and splitting it from the additional parcels that have been purchased by the Diversion Authority for this project, but in the end won't be needed. That the best approach is to move forward with a plating and subdivision of the diversion property. And so this property includes area south of St. Benedict at the wild rice control structure. This is an area that is construction is beginning and includes several areas both on the east and west side of a section line road. And as part of this, we'll also be eliminating the statutory easement on that section line road. So with that, it was moved through the County Planning Commission and approved, and is now moved to the County Commission for approval. With that, I know Katie Birch, legal for the diversion authority, is also on it. If there's any questions of myself or her, but that's my opening comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Benson. I don't see Katie, unless it's a phone number.
I'm here. I'm just under Luke Andred.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Just make sure you're there. Commissioners, questions, discussion? Motion. Mr. Benson, anything further to add? Wait, Commissioner Steen is going to take the mic. Commissioner Steen, please.
I was going to ask Commissioner Brightling, you sit on the planning meetings, right?
Yes. Yes, I do.
You're fully apprised of what's going on and in support of this?
I'm surprised at what's going on. I think the consequences, our state's attorney may have some concerns.
Mr. Burdick, we're talking about you in front of your back.
So in response to that, I think what might be the best way to move forward on this, if you're amenable to it, is to have Ms. Birch describe their thinking on this approach, and then I can offer commentary on that. I think the intent here is to make sure you fully understand what's being proposed and what may happen as a result of it.
Let's proceed in that fashion. Ms. Birch, please.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioners. The Century Code provides the authority under Chapter 24, which deals with roads, for section line easements to be eliminated through a couple processes. One of those processes is a separate process that includes vacating the road first with the jurisdiction that has authority over the road, and then closing the section line. We think that there is an exception to that alternative, and that includes platting the road. Cass County Joint owns all of the property that's included in the plat, which includes the property that is underlying the road that is currently constructed as 173rd Avenue Southeast. We think that we can go through the platting process and eliminate that section line road that's there. The county is the jurisdiction with authority over platting, so that is why we have filed the plat with you and ask you to approve it.
Mr. Burdick, your thoughts?
I was thinking we might get a little more than that from Ms. Birch. But that said, I guess my offering would be this, and then maybe Ms. Birch wants to respond to that. A couple of things. The statutes and decisions regarding roads in North Dakota have been recognized by the courts to be various and at times confusing, and the court has indicated that you need to be careful about using any one decision, or maybe that was the Attorney General who said that, any one decision or any one statute to tell you everything you need to know. That said, there are a few Attorney General's opinions related to the topic, but not directly on point to our situation of using a subdivision. But there was one in the year 2020 issued to the Foster County State's Attorney that has this sentence, and I'm going to explain to you, or I'm going to read to you that sentence, and then maybe Ms. Birch wants to comment on that. This is the Attorney General. Therefore, it is my opinion that the procedures in North Dakota Century Code 240703, and That's the one that Ms. Birch was referring to. The procedures there to close travel along a section line easement may be used only after an existing road has been vacated. It is my further opinion that an improved road built by a political subdivision or state may only be closed under the statutory authority resting with the entity having jurisdiction over that improved road as part of its highway system. So there is an opinion which on its face would seem to question this approach, but that decision was not dealing with a circumstance like ours, where there is a proposed subdivision being addressed by the entity, namely you.
Ms. Birch.
Sure. The statutory section that Mr. Burdick cites, 240703, begins with, except as included in incorporated cities or within platted subdivisions, you follow the procedure that's outlined in 240703. If you recall back to what Mr. Birch or Mr. Burdick just said, the AG's opinion says the procedure in 240703. When we are relying upon this platting of the subdivision, we are not relying upon the procedure that's set forth in 240703. We're relying upon the platting part of it. So we're relying upon an exception to that procedure. So that's why we think that we can utilize this approach.
Commissioner Steen has a question.
I actually have a motion
Commissioner, he has a motion.
on the table. I have a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission and staff and recommend approval of the final plat as a proposal meets the goals and objectives of the Cass County Comprehensive Plan, the Cass County Highway Access Plan, the Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance, the Cass County Subdivision Ordinance, and all other applicable regulations.
Is there a second, please?
Second by Pollock.
Moved and seconded. Commissioners, discussion. Any discussion? One more time. Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Steen?
Yes.
Sherling?
Yes.
Brightling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Motion passes. Mr. Benson, anything further to add?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any further discussion? If not, we'll move on to next item. Item 3A, salary survey recommendations. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, good afternoon. I have a bit of information that we're going to provide to you this afternoon, and then look for your feedback, just to give you a little bit of a roadmap of how I wanted to approach this and organize the information coming to you. I'll provide an overview of that, and you can let me know if you'd like me to proceed in a different manner. I'm going to give essentially a high level overview that follows along the lines of my briefing memo. We have Mr. Montplaisir, Finance Director, on the line, who can go through the financial implications of the recommendation. There are several recommendations in there. And then we also have representatives from Gallagher on the line who could talk a little bit about the methodology of the survey that was conducted. So I didn't want to overwhelm you from the start with the amount of information we're going to present. That's my intent of how to move forward unless I hear differently.
Proceed, sir. Everyone can hear Mr. Wilson okay correctly? Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay. As practice over the past number of years, the county has had a practice of once every 3 years conducting a salary survey utilizing Gallagher benefits. And that would normally come up next year in 2021. There were some issues raised and discussions during the strategic planning process last year that talked about salary and benefits on the county as a whole. That was a good discussion, a robust discussion. At the end of that, the commission indicated that it would be appropriate to do a little bit of an enhanced salary survey, market study, and do that a year early because of some of the feedback that came about through that strategic planning process. So in the first paragraph of the briefing memo, you see a number of the points that were directions to myself of what to look for in an updated salary survey wage study. And that was compared to previous studies to have more focus on the local labor market, to collect private salary survey information as well as public sector, include commission salary survey, and review the salary step matrix with potential recommendations coming forward. And also to present this information in a user-friendly format, as this does get to be very data rich information, and that ability to bring it forward in a lack of a better term, user-friendly format was part of the discussion. So the final report is included in your packet in the form of a PowerPoint. It's been provided to you. I believe you've had a chance to review that. I am going to go over a number of high points that were different sections of the report. Look for any questions you might have, and then would look to Mr. Montplaisir for the financial implications and recommendations. Again, the first part of that, the request in this salary survey was really looking at the benefits, the health and retirement benefits that are provided by Cass County, and compare that to the marketplace. And again, public sector and private sector. And as you can see from the briefing memo, it is Cass County leads the market in employer contribution to retirement benefits. Aligns with the market in vacation and holidays provided, and then lags slightly in personal bereavement and sick days. Cass County leads or aligns with the market in medical and dental insurance provided. Overall, the county is aligned with market in benefits. And I think that is something as an organization that we take pride in, is the benefits package, but it is affirming to see that is in fact what was discovered in an outside review. Moving forward into the compensation end of the review, this is where you're looking at really just wages, straight wages, and Cass County highly competitive with the public sector, the combined public and private sector. Compared directly with the private sector, Cass County is competitive, and that gets a little bit to their methodology. There's highly competitive, there's competitive, and then I believe the third section is out of alignment. There's a note there that compared to the county's market position of 2 years ago, the county is now 5% behind the previous position.
Yeah.
Based on that, there is a implementation and a salary structure recommendation, and I would imagine that may be where we spend a considerable amount of our time in this discussion. I will look to Mr. Montplaisir as he has taken a closer financial look at those different options, and we'll get into those once we move beyond the higher overview. We also had a section here where we looked at commissioner pay, and that was broken down really on the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile of where commissioner or policy board salaries are in comparative organizations. Beyond that, I was asked to, and our HR office was asked to take a look at what potential impacts might be if we looked at some sort of a per diem structure for compensation for commissioners. We do have our neighboring county to the east, Clay County, Minnesota, has a what I would call basically a hybrid of a per diem structure where they have a base salary, and then they have a per diem structure on days where commissioners attend meetings that are particular to their portfolios or committee assignments. So meetings where the board of the whole would not be eligible for the per diem, but for example, in your case, a portfolio assignment or a committee assignment would be eligible for for the per diem payment. What we did to attempt to summarize or at least make a comparison of how that would equate is we took a look at all of for the 5 of you, your activities over a 2-month period of what really I had on my calendar, somewhat of a master calendar of what I know of your activities, and plugged those in, and then reached out to the 5 of you and looked for additional input of dates that you might provide to me, and we would factor into that. And then using that information, we came up with an average or an estimate that would work out across the board to an additional $4,100 a month, or on average $820 per month per commissioner if all commissioners attended equal number of meetings. So that is the very highest level overview to kick this off. Obviously, a big part of this is a recommendation to adjust the salary matrix. And Mr. Montplaisir, the Finance Office, have looked at a couple of the different options that are included and have provided some feedback of what the cost impact is to those. Before I turn it over to Mr. Montplaisir, one quick note that I would have for you is in the last couple of months, I have started communicating much more frequently with my counterparts, county and city administrator in Moorhead and Clay County. Talking to the Clay County administrator at the end of last week, they went through a similar study at the end of 2019, implemented in 2020, and I can go through some of their results as we wrap up this discussion. So at this point, unless you have questions for me, I would turn it over to Mr. Montplaisir to go through some of the specifics of the different options that are laid out and the financial impacts for the county if you chose to adopt the various options.
Commissioners, questions? If not, Mr. Montplaisir, your thoughts, sir.
Okay, we've been trying to decipher what it would actually cost the county, and actually we came up with a percentage about the same as our consultants did. When we start looking at salaries, the first thing we do is we take what our employees are currently paid as of whenever we're starting that, and we project them out to the end of the year. The consultants, of course, we're starting with what they're currently paid. We project out to the end of the year so that we have a base of what we're going to apply things to. In your budget, what we included was our current policy, which is employees would receive no COLA next year, but they would include steps. Ironically, if we look at just going next year without any steps, we end up that payroll is going to cost us less next year than what it did this year, what we budgeted for this year. And that's due to some retirements, and you replace people at a lower pay and that sort of thing. If we update using our current pay scale with steps, it increased our payroll 0.75% or less than 1%. And a lot of that is because we have a lot of employees who are at the top of their pay scale. We have a lot of employees who are over the midpoint, and then we have those employees who are under midpoint. Under midpoint, they receive a step increase of about 3.5%. over midpoint, they receive a step increase of about 1.75%. And then employees receive those step increases in the month of their anniversary of employment. So, well, some employees may get both a COLA normally and a step increase on January 1st. Others will receive a COLA and a step increase anywhere from February through December. So that greatly affects that overall percentage of salary. This year, of course, our projections are based on a 0 COLA and then a step on their anniversary, and that's where it comes up with about a 0.75% increase in salaries. The other thing we looked at is moving people into this new pay scale, and for our computations, we used option number 2 because we felt it best fit with our current county policy. And that is that, you know, people generally don't go down in steps. So if they were at step 15 in the old system, they went basically to step 15 in the new system. The exception would be those employees who were, say, at step 16, but we only had 15 steps in the new system because some of those steps were, they took a year off the end. With that, we came up with about a 3.53% increase in overall salaries, which isn't too bad. And then we ran another option with going into the new system with employees getting their normal steps. And that, in other words, if I went into the new system January 1st, I might end up getting a pay raise to get to my step that I was on. And then later in the year, I may get another step increase following a normal policy. The reason we did it that way is that maintains the step increases that we currently have. There are a couple of different ways of doing that. Number one, the third way we figured it without any steps. Employees would go into the new system. They would stay there until maybe 2022 when they'd get a step increase. So some employees would get a step increase, you know, a year after we went into that. Other employees might be just about 24 months or 23 months because if they were at their normal step was in December. So overall, if we looked at where we were with 2020, if we fully implemented this system, going with the option 2 with steps, it would cost about 5.67% of salary. And the other thing is, you know, you don't just pay salaries, you also pay benefits, and so you'd have some additional costs on that for like Social Security, Medicare, and retirement. What we did so that you'd see the effect on the budget is we actually included a lump sum going from the current payroll to 2021 with steps to this new system. We included that under the administrator's budget. In fact, we included too much. We included about 1.5 million. It's actually, with the benefits, it works out to 1,236,000. So it's a little over in there. With that, any questions? I'm glad to try to answer them.
Commissioner Pollack with a question. On option 2 without steps, does anyone go backwards? Any of the employees go backwards?
No.
Okay. And, oh gosh, I have to think about how to ask this one. Someone else can ask a question.
Commissioners, further questions?
I have a question.
Commissioner Sherling.
Thank you. So, Mike, can you explain to me what exactly this option 2 is? Because when I look at the numbers, there are, you know, employees that are making more than what, you know, we've reported here from the other on the surveys. Some are making less. most of them are somewhere in the middle. But I guess my concern is correctional officers and sheriff's deputies. And when I look at those numbers, it appears to me that those need to be brought up some. So how do we equalize all of this and making sure that we're not just giving everybody another raise that really isn't going to solve the problem on the top end?
I think that question would probably be better answered by our consultants. We're simply taking their scale, their recommendations, and putting numbers to it. I'm not sure how you equalize the other problems. I know in the strategic planning, the sheriff's office kind of said, well, we'd like fewer steps. So we get to the high end of our range faster. Don't know how that sets with them once they get to the high end of that range and then they have nowhere to go. What do you do at that point? But yeah, I think Commissioner Shirley, your question is better answered by our consultants.
Well, and I think the answer to that is, after you've been someplace in any department, you would have an opportunity to advance into other positions. And then, not in all departments, but in many departments, that would be the case. And certainly in the sheriff's department, there's plenty of opportunity to advance up the ranks. But to me, it doesn't make sense if there's a position that's already being paid more than what the average is, why we would increase that salary even more. And so are the consultants on? Can they answer my question?
Yeah, this is Mike Verdorn with Gallagher, and and August is on the phone as well with me. So we'll try our best to answer, because some of it we need to look. It's connected back to the individual data and everything for each of those jobs, and the ultimate goal. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to listen in and everything and be here. So, and appreciate the questions and discussions around this as well. So, the ultimate goal is to make sure we're developing a salary structure that utilizes all the market data on a comprehensive level, because we don't have market data for all the jobs of the county. So you're using that along with the job evaluation system to create a new structure. And now, as everybody has kind of alluded to, that there's a larger change in the salary structure this year than in previous years, and primarily that is because we're kind of honing in on the labor market that was used for the custom survey. There were some revisions to that, as well as the integration of the private sector data, and we had private sector data for 22 out of those 35 benchmark jobs. So when it comes to that, there's always going to be some jobs of the county that are paid more than the average and some that are going to be less than the average, and that's all going to be tied back to the longevity that the staff have in those various positions. And so the methodology that option 2 that the county is looking at is say, we want to move into a new structure that does not change the internal pay relationships as much as possible of all the employees. So if somebody is at the maximum of the range in the old structure, they're at the maximum in the new structure. That's one of those approaches. And it's, while we've worked with other organizations that have said, hey, we can't afford or to do a full implementation like that, they may prioritize in some way of saying, we're going to look at those jobs that are only below that market point, that target market point for them as well. So that all of those are viable options. They all have benefits and some drawbacks to them. But what we're trying to do is say, here's the approach that moves into a new structure in this option, moves into a new structure with less internal relationship, internal pay changes to it. That's
Commissioner Schilling, does that help?
Well, maybe somebody could just explain to me what option 2 is.
Basically, if I could, go ahead.
Consultants.
Yeah. This is Mike again. So basically, option 2 is saying we're going to maintain everybody's current step in the new structure or whatever point they're at. If I'm at the midpoint of the range right now at the county, my new structure, it was from $40,000 to $50,000 a year, and I was at $45,000, and the new structure goes from $42,000 to $52,000. I'm going to be at the, oh my gosh, I can't even do this math in my head right now. I'm going to be at the $47,000. I'm going to maintain that exact same point in that structure. That's what option 2 is.
This is Commissioner Pollock. Go on, sorry, Mary. Continue.
Sherling and then Commissioner Pollock.
So it doesn't really fix the inequities, is kind of what I'm hearing. And then again, I just want to know, does it fix the staff members that are below, and I'm, again, looking at law enforcement, I want to make sure that we are competitive in law enforcement, and does that fix that issue?
August, do you have that spreadsheet open right now? Sorry, we're trying to tag team and there's a lot of detailed data here. Do you have the spreadsheet that shows here's the range that the corrections officers, the deputy sheriffs would be in, and how that may more align with the market than the old structure, the corrections to it, that you can detail?
We have what you sent in terms of distribution.
Yeah.
Can you reference a page? I'm looking at page 28 that shows the individual salaries, which would be our PDF 30, but I don't know if that's, what page would you like us to look at? Because yes, we have it. It's a matter of directing us.
It would be in one of the spreadsheets, because that's one of the things that we're looking at, and there's so many numbers and everything that we can look at. So one thing we're looking at that on 28 and 29, what that is comparing is here's the average pay at the county, here is the market 50th percentile that we collected for that through the custom survey, as well as any private sector data that's there. Now, corrections officers is one of those jobs that you're not going to find that match in the private sector. So those are only public sector matches for corrections officers, deputy sheriffs. Now, one of the other pieces that we'll look at, you can have so many different comparisons in here, say, here is how the current pay structure at the county is set up. Here's what the market pay structure looks like. And now here's the proposed pay structure, and how does that align with the market as well? So we're looking at all of those pieces in order to redevelop, refine that full salary structure, that you can see how it is developed through the combination. It's on page 32, and then also in page 36 shows that picture of how we're integrating all of those market data points with the internal equity to create the proposed minimum and proposed maximum. Now, there are other charts that we have that would compare the market minimum to the market maximum as well. This was the framework that we wanted to put into the report as a summary, because there's numerous different examples that we can show.
Let me jump around a little bit. We have a bunch of questions. Commissioner Pollock, then Commissioner Steen, then Mr. Wilson.
Great.
Commissioner Pollock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll have a couple of questions and a comment. Does the current budget as proposed take in the option number 2 with steps, which I read as line 6 on Mike's memo, that says 5.6%, 5.67%?
It takes it into account, but it's in there as a lump sum. It's not built into everybody's budget. It's all built into the administrator's budget.
Okay. So what we're being asked to do is to change our existing salary structure or our existing program how we apply the salary to the new program, and we're also being asked to make the adjustments to the salaries based on the new market salary. So we're really looking at two different changes. Is that correct?
That'd be correct.
Right. Okay. And if we stayed with the old system and made the adjustments to the old system, we would see a 0.75% increase in the cost of salaries. In other words, we'll adjust for the market inequities, but we'll stay with the existing salary structure administration. Would that be true?
At the 0.75, you'd be continuing with our current
Status quo.
pay scale.
Would we be making the adjustment for the market based on the market survey?
No.
Okay, but on option 2 with steps, we're incorporating both the new salary system and the market-based adjustments.
Correct.
Okay. So excessive turnover is bad, but Mike has just given us an illustration a few moments ago about why turnover is good. We don't want to encourage excessive turnover, and we need to correct that. But if we have a little turnover at the top, that's not necessarily a bad thing, even though it might be a convenience or an inconvenience rather for those of us who have to administer it. But it certainly gives opportunity for those people who want to move up in the organization. You know, and so while we want to retain employees, we don't necessarily need to target our employment practices so that every employee feels that it's just too good of a place. Well, that's not the way to say it, but we can't necessarily structure our pay scale so that we retain every employee. And that's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Steen, and then Mr. Wilson.
I just had a question from our consultant's discussion. When you say our current salary structure, and just throwing some clarification, are we referring to the range in each grade or position, or what? When you say structure, what are you actually referring to?
Yeah, that's a good question. The structure would be the ranges that are used there, the minimum, midpoint, and maximum. So we're using that market data that you would see on slide 36 is showing using that market data. The plot points on there are the benchmark jobs that exist, the salary rates that are out there in the market, the internal rating of that job for internal equity, and then combining that to create, here's what the new minimum and the new maximum should be.
Okay, so I'm looking at page 35. Pay market based on the 50th percentile of the combined market. Is that current or proposed, or is that market? I'm just trying to make sure I understand what I'm looking at.
Yeah, that is the proposed market. The next slide is just a visual of that. It would just be you see the lines of the minimum and the maximum from that chart.
And I don't suppose somewhere in the data we have the comparison to what our current is. Minimum, mid, and maximum.
36. I'm seeing 36 is, to me, that's the most telling.
It's a visual. Yep. I got the graph, but I'm wondering about the numbers, which
I got
is telling.
Gotcha.
You know, 35 is actually the numbers. So if we're talking about how far off are we on range by these different grades, that's what I would be, just one commissioner, be interested in is our ranges. Are we close to these ranges, or how we have some ranges that are so far off that they need to be market adjusted? That's what I'm looking at. And it kind of goes back to the same question that Commissioner Sherling asked, because when you read, when you look at the graph with regard to comparisons to actual RF versus mid, some of these stand out like a, what. And but I don't know where that range is for all of them. And I don't need to know that. I was just curious if somehow we have some basis to understand how far off what is our worst range differential in all of our grade categories? I get the visual graph somewhere in there.
Yep. Hold on. Yes, we do have all of that. It's in the detailed workbook here. Hold on.
While you look for that, Mr. Wilson.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Mike, question for you, and more or less ask you to comment on this. And for me, as I've taken a look at this report and tried to comprehend it on a macro matrix-wide data set that we're trying to look at, I gravitate to page 32 on the PowerPoint, actual survey comparisons. And what I understand that your research found and what your recommendation attempts to speak to is that if you look at this chart, that by and large, if you look at our matrix as a whole, you've got the current actuals for the county where we're a little below at the bottom left at the beginning of our ranges. As you proceed up that range, we go generally to the market median, and the market median for all and the market median for public. We're above for a period of steps and grades, and then there's a curve up of the market median all and the market median public, where our current actual stays in a more or less a straight trajectory, and that's so what that represents overall is that we lag at the top end, we lag at the bottom, and there's a middle there that is where we're generally pretty good. Is that a fair representation?
Yes, yes. This is Michael Gallagher. That is a fair representation of the overall market.
And the recommendations that have come out of that attempt is to look at those as the overall constraints or situation we find ourselves in, and your recommendation for the overall system based on those findings.
Yes, this is Michael Gallagher. If I believe I understand it right, the recommendations are based on the overall findings used on a comprehensive level to have a formal salary structure. We are not trying to adjust individual jobs in order to meet the market, but apply that overall trend to the full structure, if I understand the question correctly.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Pollock, Mr. Montplaisir, then Commissioner Steen. Commissioner Pollock.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked the question to consider how appropriate it is to offer the intended salary bumps in a time when many of our friends and neighbors are laid off due to the pandemic. Here's what I would like to do. I would like to make the adjustments to the market rate differences this year and consider the new payroll administration plan next year. I just think, number one, it's very complicated, and I think I'd like to take this in two steps is what I'm suggesting. We want to adjust to the market. Let's do that, and then next year let's consider a different payroll administration plan.
Mr. Montplaisir.
I guess I'm not sure how you do that. I don't know how you adjust to the market. And then are you talking about using our same pay scale, but raising our current pay scale by some percentage? I guess I'm not following.
Next question, Commissioner Pollock. Yeah. Okay.
Well, here's the way that I would look at it is we have the salary structure, but but the market survey tells us that there's certain areas that need to be adjusted. And I would say need to be adjusted up. I wouldn't adjust anyone down. But certainly like in the correctional officers where they're below anywhere from 5 to nearly 20%. I would like to see those get raised, but I don't want to do it at the same time when we implement the new payroll administration system, if that's the right word to call it, but the new STEPS program. And I don't see why that would be complicated to do. But you know, you administer this every day, and I just deal with it on the basis of a concept. So maybe I'm missing something.
Pleasure.
The way we administer salaries is we have a step schedule, and employees are generally on a step basis. Normally what we do when we adjust to the market is we move that entire pay scale by a certain percentage, which is kind of what they're doing now, except they're, you know, making some different lags between steps, that sort of thing, and cutting a step off on the end. I almost think what you're doing then is you're doing the option 2, but without steps in 2021.
Well, it looks to me like you would be doing what you have listed under as line 3, which is a $21,078,405. That your current payroll updated to 2021 with steps. To me, that's what I would call that.
Okay, that's our current pay scale.
Updated.
And not updated.
It says updated.
Well, that's a salary updated to 2021 with steps. That's the current pay scale.
Just
pay scale we're operating under today.
Yeah, and it seems to me you said earlier that everyone gets a raise.
In that case, not everyone would get a raise because some people are at the top of their scale. Some people may not have satisfactory performance. We're programmed in that, you know, if they're at the top of their scale, that's where they would sit. If they're below the top, we program in a step increase for them. Whether they get that or not is up to their supervisor.
Okay, thank you.
If I could, I'd like to go back to Mary's question on the correction officers.
Mr. Montplaisir, then Commissioner Steen.
Okay. I just, you know, I've got their detailed spreadsheet up, and for instance, here's a B-22 corrections officer. Current salary is $38,717, which is at the bottom of our scale. They're a fairly new employee. Their new scale would start out at $40,000 and go to $55,000. Their salary, to bring them to the minimum of the scale, which they'd be at the minimum of the current scale, they would go to the minimum of the new scale, would be $40,250. And then if we did the step increase, the option 2 with steps, they would get a step increase next year. And I'm just kind of going down the list. I think all of the correctional officers would be going up with whatever grade they're in as a correctional officer. We have B-22s, B-23s. Yeah, I think that's been on the correctional officers.
B-32s.
Oh, B-32s. Yeah, they would all get an increase because the scale is higher. And then, of course, if they got steps next year, that would be an additional one. So,
Commissioner Steen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Commissioner Pollock, I'm in agreement with what you started out saying, that if we've got some significant disparities in ranges, we should fix those this year. I think that's what you said, and then go forward with next year, trying to adopt this whole structure generally.
Right.
Okay, that's what I heard you saying. I think that's more than 0.75%. because it's different. It's, you got more, you're probably closer to option, line number 4 there is what I'm guessing. Option 2 for 2021 without steps. And if I'm not mistaken. So, and I am definitely in favor of what Mr. Pollock suggested we should correct. We got some real outliers. We should focus on those this year. It'd be great if we can do the whole structure this year, but I'm not sure we can. But if we cannot, then I think we should at least at a minimum focus on the outliers that have been pointed out to us. And I understand there's a difference between average and where somebody might be at. It all has to do where you're at with the step increase and on the range. And we've got some pretty good range information here. I think that was provided to us by our consultants on page 35, and so we could use that as somewhat of a basis. But so summarize, it's complicated to understand what we've got going here, but I do agree we should adjust the significant outliers this year in some fashion.
So the policy of Cass County has been to neither lead nor lag the market. I think there's no question, we are lagging the market in some areas. I think we're leading the market in some areas. I know our consultants done their best to quantify as best you can the benefit structure, which, given my personal experience, is second to none. And I literally mean second to none. There's a dollar figure there. And again, if you aren't sick, or you have a healthy family, or no littles at home that get sick, or a husband or wife with a tremendous benefit package, which again, I don't think you're going to find anything better than in Cass County, there's a substantive dollar figure that needs to be added to your compensation. And again, I know they're trying to address that as best they can. For me to cut to the chase, I would love to see, as rising tide has lifted all ships within our economy, I'd love to see those of our staff that are lagging be caught up. Commissioner Sherling's point, one of the very first comments was, the thing I'm struggling with most is the people that are far beyond the average. Look at the chart, we're seeing 20%, 15%, 17%, 15%, 11%, 8% over the median. To give a pay raise to those folks, I'm struggling with that. We love our employees, and to that point, I've asked Ms. Stoic to get, if she can, by the time we get to our budget hearings, what is our turnover rate? How many people do we actually lose? I think we'll all be surprised how few people leave. I think you have extenuating circumstances like we had within our social service department that has to do with managerial things, not salary. I think we need to figure out how to catch up the people that are at the low range and work on everything else in the next year. I'm struggling with a $1 million raise that encompasses those people that are getting over the base salary of 21.6. Again, the numbers I just read. I'm struggling with that exponentially. What we're going to do is create greater service, but a greater disparity amongst our groups. So if we can figure out how to get those that are behind caught up this year, and we can figure out how to prevent those people that are overpaid from also benefiting from that, so they can get put back into the range, that would be my happy space. And again, I still think that if you're within 1 or 2% or 3%, you're on the money, because our benefit package is, again, second to none. There's nothing out there that's even close. I'm very lucky to have the exposure that I do to the federal government, which allowed me access to page after page after page of health programs that are available to people nationwide. Nothing is close to Cass County. And it's not like, oh, it's $5 difference. No, it's substantively different. It's thousands of dollars difference. And if you get sick, it can be 10 to 15 grand. And if you go to the private sector, what you basically got happening is, in my position, where I was paying $132 a month for Cadillac insurance, you could not find a better insurance policy. You had a $20 copay, I think it was $40 emergency room, a $20 pharmaceutical benefit. That's now turned, after Obamacare, literally into a catastrophic health care plan. You'd be paying almost $500 a month for a $5,000 deductible and an $80 copay. That's what I would be paying right now in the private sector. And that's most of my friends, most of my peers. Nothing like we have. And again, if you get sick, I tell you what, you just made a $15,000 pay raise. I'll stop there. Commissioner Steen?
Sure, thank you. I don't disagree with what you're saying as far as, I think I don't disagree anyway, as far as, we need to make sure we take care of those that are way out of range, underneath. And, what do we do with those that are over range? And if there's an issue, unless it's a COLA, which we've decided, I think we'll decide there'll be no COLA this year. Then then what's next is there is no increase. That's how you may fix this issue. I don't know how else, you can't keep giving increases across the board and expect somehow to fix disparity that shouldn't exist. That's my thought. You just can't keep doing that.
I agree. Commissioner Breitling?
I'm looking at base pay salary results, 2 pages.
28 and 29, sir.
Mine aren't numbered.
Bottom right hand. I think it's 28, 29 corner.
Yes. Can anyone tell me what it would cost to continue our present step increases and adjust anyone whose salary is negative down to 3%, minus 3%?
Mr. Montplaisir, any thoughts?
That would be, yeah, we'd have to go into every employee, and figure out what that percentage would cost. And then the problem is how do you administer that? Where do you put them in do you create a new pay scale for every employee? New step system? Maybe Cindy has some idea on that, I'm not sure.
Mr. Wilson's motioning. Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Chair, to Commissioner Breitling's question, in short, I don't have an answer to your question there, but I would look back to our friends at Gallagher on this point, because as you look at those particular positions that are somewhere in the range, whether they're 1% below or 1% above, just keep in mind that this is a sample. This is not a comprehensive look at every position that we have in the county. These this is a sample set that again looks to take an overall snapshot at the overall range, but it's not comprehensive. And so I see exactly what you're trying to address, and if I'm open to suggestions if there's a way to do something like that.
Commissioner Breitling's point, that's exactly what I'm suggesting, and I realize the complexity of this. It's probably impossible. But essentially what I want to get across from my perspective, and again, the other commissioners can speak for themselves, is, again, rising tide lifts all ships. Well, the people at the lower ranges, when McDonald's up in North Fargo and Burger King up in North Fargo are starting at $12, $13 an hour, they don't have the best benefit packages in the world, but they do have health care. They do have bonuses, especially for management. The reality is probably $10 an hour isn't going to do it anymore. That's just the nature of the beast, whether you're in county government or whether you're making hamburgers to fast food place. It's just the reality of it. So what Commissioner Breitling is hinting at, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I was hinting at is let's get the people that are low caught up and let's wait on the rest. And how you do that, I don't know, but I want to make sure that staff here knows that if they're underpaid by, we go through the numbers that they just said, 10, 12, 14%, the county commission, again, I shouldn't speak for us. Me sitting here as a county commissioner, I want those people to get caught up to what is a good average without taking the people, as I referenced before, that are 20, 17 over and exacerbating that issue, because it doesn't make any sense to give someone who's 20% overpaid right now an additional 3 or 5 or whatever percent bump to, and again, we all want to have the easy discussion of let's make sure those are underpaid get caught up. But the tough decision is, yeah, there's some people that are really overpaid. What do we do there? That's hard. So I'll stop there. Mr. Wilson, and then back to Mr. Breitling. Commissioner Breitling, if you want to. Mr. Wilson, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I appreciate your discussion here, and I think you'll notice that on the briefing memo, there is not a recommended motion. No, number one, because there's a lot of data that we had to bring at you, and some very difficult decisions you have to make. I think, you know, the way this is plugged into the budget tentatively, and Mr. Montplaisir can speak to this, is that it's in as a lump sum precisely for the fact that it can be adjusted more easily as you are working through a thought process and coming to some decision, whatever that may be. I think I hear some direction from the comments that have come here of what we may be advised to look at and how we might be reflective of the comments here. How that actually would be put into practice right at this moment without speaking with our HR director and our finance director and probably going back and having additional conversations with our consultant. I don't know offhand, but I think I understand the tone and the direction of some of the comments that that you've provided.
Thank you, Mr. Montplaisir. And then Commissioner Steen.
I just want to point out the chart that you're looking at where the pages 28 and 29, you're comparing the current actual salary of these positions to the combined market median. That doesn't take into account whether that person just started yesterday or whether they've been here 30 years. It's just the combined actual salary and then trying to compare that to the combined market median. So it's not like, you know, you'd take, say, accounting technicians. We've got accounting technicians who have been here 10, 15 years. Well, they're probably paid over the combined market median, but it's understandable at that point. If you've got somebody who is brand new, they might be paid less than that.
Commissioner Steen.
So, conundrum, right? We got to figure out how to do something right and how to do it easy, but that's not going to happen. So when I look at Mike's numbers here for the step increase, it looks to me like just based upon steps only, Mike, that it's about a $263,000 cost. Your 0.75%, is that? I want to make sure I understand this. 0.75%, $260,000 increase.
Chris Tate going on. Holy cow.
It's only numbers, Mike.
Yeah, it's 262,000.
Okay. Do what I do. 260. And so my thought there is, so 262,000 is steps. I don't think we want to interfere with the step process. I don't think we want to do that. So then what comes after that is, okay, if it's not steps, what more is the commission willing to spend on compensation to help correct some of these significant disparities? Do we want to go to instead of 0.75%, do we want to go to 4%? Do we want to go to 5%? And then we have to figure out how we spread that. That's a job process, and it should be basically used or done using the information we have. And I agree with Mike on page 28, that's an average. When I look back on page 20 or 35, I think what we've got here are proposed ranges based upon the market. I don't know how far, and this is the question I asked earlier, I don't know how far off these ranges are from the ranges we currently have in place. And maybe this is where it makes this easy. We move somebody into a step, which I know was done by Gallagher, sort of kind of into the range of the step with it which they belong, and find out how much it really costs based upon actual true data that we have. If that makes any sense. And maybe it says, hey, if we move into this range, we're spending more than we want to spend. How do we fix that? You know, I don't know how to fix that other than take a look at it if we want to make a correction, or we can ignore it for another year, and then we can go forward and say we'll fix it next year, which we never do. 2 or 3 years. I mean, that's what's happened. We talk about it. Let's fix it, we move on. Next year comes down to the crunch time, and we don't have time to do it, and we don't fix it again. And we have a study done, and we want to look at the study. So we have options here. We can get this done if we truly want to. We just have to set what our bogey is as far as how much additional funds that we want to spend on compensation over and above the step increase. It sounds too simple because it isn't that simple, but that's the way I would do it.
Commissioner Pollock, did you have something to answer?
No, but I see a consensus forming. You know, this is so complicated that if I had to explain this to someone, I couldn't. And so, at an attempt to simplify things, I would like to follow the suggestions here that Mr. Steen is laying out, and that is, let's deal with the inequities, and next year we can change the payroll administration plan.
Commissioner Steen.
And I appreciate that. And then the issue there is going to have to be is how much are we willing to spend to deal with the inequities? That's where we got to, that's the next number we have to go with. How much are we willing to spend to do that?
Can I answer that? I think that we will spend less than what's in the current budget for increase in salaries in order to correct those inequities, and really that has to be our goal, is to correct those inequities.
Commissioner Brightly.
Isn't that what I asked? What would it cost to bring 3 or 4 or 5?
It is.
3 different.
We don't have that number yet.
That's the problem. That's sort of the problem. It's everyone is well intended, I think, and I think, as Mr. Wilson suggested, that we're guiding our staff to boy, we sure would like to have this number result. The reality is that I don't know that we're going to have it in time to react of any substance. Mr. Wilson has a thought.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, on the conceptual level, I think you've identified some pretty clear ideas of what you would like to accomplish. At this moment, I feel like I need to sit down and have some conversations with Mr. Montplaisir, Ms. Stoik, and our friends over at Gallagher, because I need some suggestions of how we look at bringing a proposal forward. So I think
15 hours, Mr. Wilson. That's the struggle. Honestly, those on the phone, we're having budget hearings in the next 2 days, and this is when we react to this discussion. So yes, you literally have 15 hours. Mr. Wilson, continue, and then Commissioner Steve.
Well, and I guess what I would say is that you have a number plugged in right now. You've given some direction of where you probably are not inclined to go. I think we can have some conversations and go back and say, okay, what can we do? Again, going back to our friends who deal with this more every day than we do, is say, give us some options of what could you do and still be, not run into compression issues and be within our matrix. And you will, you've got a little bit of time before a final budget is approved, but clearly you've laid out some work for us, and I think we can follow up with this and bring some additional information back to you.
Commissioner Steen.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bradley.
So, again, I don't have the budget in front of me. We talked about this number that's in there. Can you tell me what that number is? Because I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, I have it right here.
Okay.
It is $1,552,883.
That's the lump sum that's included in the administrative.
Estimated cost of implementing option 2 of the salary survey.
$1,552,000. Okay.
Right.
1.5 million.
Oh,
that's right.
1,500,000.
Which is actually a greater sum than it would cost to implement number 2.
Yes.
So right now, before we had this data, Mike just threw in 1.5 million, knowing it would cover it. The actual cost is 1.25?
It's about 1.25.
Okay, that's the number.
So
that's everything, and that includes steps. No.
Yeah, it doesn't take care of the inequities either.
It steps, but it doesn't address the inequity.
It starts, but it exacerbates.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a question.
Commissioner Steen, then Commissioner.
I just want to make sure. So the number in the budget beyond steps and other costs is 1.25 million. Yes or no?
No. It's 1.552 million. That's what's in the budget. Mike has given us a different number orally.
Okay, the number that should be in the budget, 1.25 million?
Correct. Had we had this data when Mike was preparing it, yes.
So then, if you take the 1.25 million, something between 0 and 1.25 million would give us a range that we could start working with, and we could give back to administration and say, come up with a fix for the inequities, somewhere not to exceed this number.
In theory, yes.
Right, well, that's all we have right now. I think.
Commissioner Breitling.
The question I have is, Mr. Montplaisir, the 262,000 for step increase costs would be adjusted dramatically, would they not, if we brought people who were below salary level up to within 3 or 4 or 5% of where they should be? Would that also increase the step increase cost?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how you would do that. Like I say, right now, what we have in every department budget is the current pay scale with their employees receiving steps next year. Now, I mean, I'm not quite sure how you're going to increase those salaries if you're going to talk about, if you're talking about a sheriff correctional officer who is currently at a step 1, or you're talking about moving them up to a step 6 or a step 7, how you're going to do that, we'd have to address that with each individual employee.
I would have my thoughts on that.
Commissioner Breitling, anything further? Commissioner
I think it would increase the amount of step increase cost.
And two things. I would agree with Commissioner Breitling, it would increase it. But if you have 3% on 3%, you're talking pretty minuscule. The 3% increase and the 3% step on that is not going to add up too much. But Mike, wouldn't it make sense to change if we've got a range out of line? I don't think we'd move people in steps. I think one of the suggestions here is put them in the step consistent with the updated range. And the ranges we should update would be those that are totally out of line, that are the most significant variances from the averages. So if we just change the range, keep the person in the step, that to me would be the most reasonable way to correct.
Do you think it would self-correct because the range is adjusted?
Range is adjusted, the steps adjust because step 1 of one range is higher than it was in the other range. I mean, because you fixed the range. I think the issue is we're out of range.
I think what you're speaking of is much like we did with.
This is Cindy, our HR director, Ms. Stoic.
Yep, that one's on up there, yep.
Just want to make sure you all heard what she said.
I think maybe what you're speaking of is what was done with the attorneys in the state's attorney's office several years ago, where it was a separate pay scale was made just for the attorneys.
A block adjustment, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that's what you're
possibly, and I don't know exactly all the mechanics, but to me it was changing the range of a certain position.
And that's what we did with the attorneys.
Mr. Chairman?
Just for reference, I think Mr. Burdick has stepped away. If we need him, he's apologetic, but he is away. Commissioner Pollack.
I think that we've talked about this issue enough, and that let's give our professionals a chance to condense what we've said into something that makes sense for tomorrow. I don't know that we can add much more to this issue right now.
I would concur, but let's have our commissioners. Any final thoughts on this item, commissioners? If not, we okay to move on? We have direction from our administrator, HR director, chewing on her nails, calling us names. Trying to think, Mr. Montplaisir, I don't see you grimacing. Oh, there was a smile. Okay, good. No, Mike. No, we're moving on.
Just one thought.
Mike Montplaisir, please.
Mommy.
When you're talking about adjusting a range, you have to understand that there's more than one position in a range. For instance, B23 has correctional officers, death investigators, highway equipment operators, IT specialists, principal clerks, accounting techs, veteran service. So there's just a multiple of people in every one of these grades.
Understood, sir. Ms. Stoy.
And that's why I was speaking to what we did with the attorneys, just create a step separate, like for the correctional officers, they'd have their own pay scale.
And again, I don't know that we have the right answer right now, but we're going to move on. Item 3B, cost of living adjustment. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you. Related to the last topic, the last time you did look at COLA recommendation for 2021 budget, you deferred that for the discussion you just had. You have a longstanding practice of using the regional CPI number as your COLA base for the upcoming year. For the current CPI number is a negative 0.7 rather than looking at a negative number that precedent would direct that would be a zero COLA. I don't know if you're prepared to make take an action on that, but I know that is something that the finance office needs to plug into payroll as they're moving forward. But you have some direction for us to consider moving forward on comments on the compensation study. But we are looking for your direction on a COLA recommendation.
Commissioner Pollak and Commissioner Steen.
I move to recommend a 0% COLA based on the Department of Labor Consumer Price Index for the Midwest region.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Steen.
And I second it and support it because I am very optimistic about what our management team is going to come up with in the next 12 or 16 hours, whatever it might be.
They have 13 straight hours. They all know I'll be up all night if they need me, so.
Now call Rick.
There you go, even better. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Pollak,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Sherling,
Yes.
Brightling.
Yes.
Motion passes. Anything further, Mr. Wilson, on that?
No.
Not. Next item, coronavirus update.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my update is fairly brief. I can answer any questions you want, but I would largely stick to my written comments in the memo, other than we do have a state emergency commission meeting coming up on August 3rd. At the last emergency commission meeting, the bulk of the Cass County request was deferred until this upcoming meeting, largely because many other municipalities and counties did not follow the lead of Cass County and what was being considered as part of potential projects. So coming out of the June meeting, $124,925 in expenses were approved. The remaining request is going to be considered on August 3rd.
Good. I'm still in that meeting. Are we done? Can we?
Oh,
yes, you're done.
Yep.
Gosh, okay, let me log.
Our friends on Gallagher can disconnect if they so choose.
Yeah, go to work.
Mr. Wilson, continue.
So I apologize. We've got the upcoming meeting is on August 3rd, and we should get some direction at that point. We're told by our friends at State Association of Counties that we've been working with that really our ask is in line, and we should be in good shape. We meet our asks meet guidelines, so we will see at that point. Commissioner Chair Peterson and myself continue to be on 3 times a week calls with Fargo Cass public health leaders and staying up to speed on the day-to-day issues that are being dealt with on the COVID-19 response. I guess I would open it up for questions if there are any questions that you'd have for me. Otherwise, I would be done.
Commissioners, any questions?
Commissioner Pollak, who's lobbying the emergency commission if that's the ones who are making the decision on the disbursement dollars?
We have, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Pollak, we provided additional information to the board that they were requested. Really, it was lobbying effort. I don't know if I would characterize it as such. That the feedback from the meeting in June was simply that they wanted to hear from other counties and municipalities about capital requests that other entities might submit before making those decisions. And so ours, we are consistent, and we've been in close contact with, again, with the state association and with the Department of OMB, Office of Management and Budget, to see if we needed to provide anything more. We did provide some additional specific information, but largely we are following the direction that provide a little more information, but otherwise wait for other entities to also provide more information.
So maybe to your point, Commissioner Pollack, the Association of Counties is, the League of Cities is. Mr. Wilson and I were on a phone call directly with the governor's office 2 weeks ago, plus or minus. I think that I've talked to local legislators asking for a voice. They've informed my friends, our friends that sit in the state legislature, about what our potential goals are. So I think we're doing as much as we probably can. I think the reality is there is some politics behind this, but sort of that delicate balance of making sure they're aware and privy to what we're asking for and that we're available. And I'm hoping to be invited on the governor's task force call. I've been informed that I'll be on it, and Mr. Wilson, probably both of us actually will, but we'll be available for when it comes up as a part of dialogue. So does that answer the question a little bit more? We're not letting sleeping dogs lie, if that's what you're concerned about.
Okay. Well, the state had everything that they needed to make a decision that would have been favorable to Cass County, and instead they chose to open it wider. So that does not bode well, in my opinion.
The understanding through the Association of Counties is very few people are coming forth from around the state with actual projects like we have. It's still PPEs and the basics of operations, but what we're being told through our networking is that no one else is coming through with anything substantive. I know the courts didn't come through, State District Court, Mr. Wilson didn't come through beyond us. I don't think there was much of anything, which was shocking. Will they come out with that now? Maybe, but again, it's a matter of the foresight that other commissions have, and I think we do a pretty good job out of Cass advocating for our needs. So,
well, I'm concerned that these dollars are going to end up out in the oil field, going to work for some oil company is what it's going to amount to.
We've already approved, meaning the state, have already approved $61 million to do such activities. That's done already. Or $66 million, Mr. Wilson, 60 plus million dollars have already been appropriated.
Okay, thank you.
That should make you feel warm and fuzzy, right?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Pollack, I would say you're not the only one that has that concern. I would simply say that.
These are big, and again, it isn't a needful thing. I think that it can be done when we have $80 a barrel oil, but is what it is. Anything further for Mr. Wilson?
That concludes my report unless there are other questions.
Any questions, commissioners? If not, State Water Commission reimbursement, Mr. Montplaisir.
You've got two requests in front of you. Both of them deal with property purchases. One is for $1,650,000 and the other is for $15,060.
Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize the chair to sign reimbursement request number 104 and number 105 for the amounts previously stated to the State Water Commission to distribute funds to the Metro Flood Diversion Authority according to the terms and conditions of House Bill 1020.
Is there a second? Moved and second. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Breitling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Sherling?
Yes.
Passes. Mr. Montplaisir, anything further?
No.
Vouchers. Commissioner Steen.
I reviewed the vouchers and moved to approve.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second, any discussion? Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Sherling?
Yes.
Breitling?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Motion passes. Committee reports. Let's start with Mr. Burdick, who isn't here. Ha-ha. Commissioner Pollock.
No report other than I do intend to be in person for the budget hearings starting tomorrow.
Wonderful. Commissioner Steen.
Just one short report on committee. West Central Regional Juvenile Center had their meeting last week. Good news from that meeting. Their project, which they were concerned was going to be over budget and some type of call, ended up being completed with sufficient funds available in the bond issue, so that was great. Profit-wise, there's an $839,000 credit to members out of 2019 to be applied to 2021, I believe. 223,000 of that will be allocated to Cass County, and our estimated 21 cost for their preliminary budget was about 521,000. And Robert and I talked a little bit, and I think we talked about putting how much into the budget. 575. It's a very preliminary, it's a very skinny budget, and I will not be surprised if that does not go up. We'll know for sure by the time we're done with our process.
One thing as a reminder to everyone listening and to those of us participating, there was some angst regarding our investment across the river. I think they are instantaneously, I can't even hardly believe it's this soon. If everything works out within 10 years, we will have gotten refunded every penny we put into that building across the river. Plus we've had better programming for our kids. This was absolutely a wonderful idea from stem to stern. It was a win for everyone involved. I hope that remains, for the foreseeable future. But if this trend continues, which given the fact the state of Minnesota is continuing to close juvenile centers across the state, they'll be having to put them somewhere, which is sort of the method behind this capacity, is that we have the ability to save taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars into perpetuity and provide better services for the children that are having to be customers. This is absolutely a wonderful program, given the fact that we all believe that we wish we weren't having to arrest anybody, but that's just not reality right now. So thank you, commissioners, for supporting what was a wonderful idea, and it's already showing how wonderful idea it was. Commissioner Steen, anything further? That's it. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, no report today.
Wow, Commissioner Breitling.
I have a brief report. One of the portfolios that I service is the weed board. And at the July 13, 2020 meeting, we acknowledged the service of Ken Hagan, who has served 22 years and is still on the board, and Larry Wilcox, who has served 25 years and is still on the board, and Chris Murch, who is, after serving 8 years, will step down, but I informed him that he would only be able to do so after he found his replacement.
Nice.
We gave them a small gift out of the appropriation that was authorized in our previous budget, and they were very appreciative. And these people are really thorough and dedicated and knowledgeable in the area that they serve. And I think we need to let the people of Cass County know that there are some out there that are doing their job as citizens.
And there's no compensation for this board, is there?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't think
there may be mileage.
No, I don't think there's anything. So these folks have been coming.
They get a donut every meeting, that's it.
Yeah, it's donut and coffee, and they're giving their time for 20 plus years. It's amazing that we've got people lined up to do these things that have that sort of dedication over 20 years of working for literally free, sans the donut and coffee, right? It's amazing. So, Commissioner Breitling, anything further?
Nothing else.
Thank you.
Except that their budget is going to be 1/10 of a mil less than it was previously. Weed board.
Commissioner Sherling.
Thank you. Just quickly, the land development code for the city of Fargo is being professionally evaluated, and there'll be a presentation at the August 4th meeting. If anybody is interested in listening in on that, that'll be virtual, but I'm sure it'll be recorded, and you could go to the Fargo website and listen to that if you're interested in their land development code. And then also our conference for the North Dakota Association of Counties, whether or not or how they're going to hold it, they will hold it, but how it will be done virtually, a combination, in person, whatever, that should be decided the first part of August. In the meantime, they are taking applications for nominations for the Excellence in County Government. In particular, employee category is not sponsored, so that deadline is August 7th. And that's everything.
Thank you, Commissioner. My report, we've all been busy. Mr. Wilson gave you a briefing on sort of what we've gone up to. With that, we have budget hearings the next couple of days. Hopefully we won't have to go into Friday, but tomorrow 8 a.m. is our goal. Correspondence.
There is none.
Nice.
No.
Item number 9.
Move to adjourn.
Second, please.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
Everybody tomorrow
Everyone,
morning.
thank you.
See y'all tomorrow,
See you
one
soon.
way or the other.